There is a kind of silence that isn't empty, it is waiting. Captain Jake Morrison felt that silence as he stood on the bridge of the USS Blackstar and watched Earth burn across the main screen. The planet hung there like an old photograph scorched at the edges, cities that had been homes for millennia reduced to glowing craters. Red ships from the Galactic Empire drifted above the atmosphere, their energy beams slicing planetary defenses like knives through cloth. It was a violence practiced for generations, it had a rhythm and a geometry all its own. Jake's hands trembled on the cold rail, and somewhere in the back of his throat there was a sound like grief trying to remember how to speak. For 3 years the Empire had hunted humanity like a rumor that refused to die. The Vorthak, tall, scaled, with teeth like tools and eyes the color of old bile, led them. The Zephyrians, insectal and precise, chittered at orders and carried cruelty like armor. They had names for humanity, pests, curiosities, things to be culled. That was the language of conquest. It mattered, because language frames the world it wants to remake. Lieutenant Amy Carter sat at her console, fingers moving over glowing controls as if she could braid the signals coming in from Earth into Hope. Her voice was steady, but fragile. "Sir," she said, "Earth Command sending their final message to any human ships in system. They want everyone to withdraw to the outer colonies. Earth cannot be saved." The words landed like cold rain. Jake closed his eyes for a moment. Earth was the map of his life, the place where his parents had lived, the schools where he learned how to fix things and how to lie about being brave, the small city where he met his wife before the first invasion took her away. Now Earth was a memory with heat rising off its bones. Commander Ben Hughes stood beside him. Ben and Jake had been boys together in Texas, 2 maps of the same place that had been folded differently. They joined the Space Navy on the same day and had learned to read each other in battle. Ben looked at the tactical numbers with a kind of private sorrow. "We're ready to fight, but we are only one ship against more than 200 warships," he said quietly. "Some of their heavy cruisers could wipe out 10 of our battleships without breaking a pattern." The Blackstar was not an ordinary ship. 2 years earlier, a small alien scout had crashed on Mars and left its engine like an unreadable poem. Human. Scientists had been practicing translation, and out of that obsession came the Blackstar, a secret vessel built in a fever to hold answers. Its quantum drive allowed velocities that flirted with physics, its hull was a lattice of alloys that sang under stress, and its rail gun technology fired solid tungsten slugs at relativistic speeds. Energy shields had become the Empire's theater of dominance. The Blackstar bet on a different language, kinetic impact, and it had learned to speak it fluently. "Open a channel to every human ship still fighting in this system," Jake commanded. Amy's hands flew. Voices stitched into the bridge, ragged, frightened, small constellations of people who had refused to vanish. There were not many left, most fleets were vapor or ghosts. "This is Captain Morrison of the USS Blackstar," Jake said into the net. He made his voice carry, made it an act of music. "For 3 years we have hidden, we have run. They burned our homes and stole our dead. Today we stop running. Today we fight back. Humans do not surrender. Humans do not forget. If you can hear this, join us. Or at least, remember." The Empire's commanders watched in a different kind of silence. On the Dominion's fist, Admiral Kathar, a Vorthak whose green scales seemed to drink light, laughed at what the bridge feed showed him, a single, small human ship. "They think one ship can defeat our fleet," he said, the sound like stone rolling slowly into a grave. "Capture them for experiments." His officers clicked and hissed. The cruelty of conquest gives way to curiosity and then to contempt. "No," Kathar decided. "Destroy it. Let it warn the others." Ben moved through his crew like a man checking if his loved one's coats were warm enough. Lieutenant Dan Phillips, young, taut, a man with quiet hands and a certainty about metal, checked the rail gaps and thrummed the weapons. Chief Engineer Carl Thompson murmured below decks to the quantum core as if it were an animal they were trying to calm. Lieutenant Katie Ross read sensors as if each blip might be a letter from the future. Dan, are our special weapons ready? Jake asked. Ready, sir. Rail batteries green. Quantum drives holding. Engine room says we have a short window if we push it. Dan's small smile was a thin thing. The Empire's shields had been a history of dominance. They had never been tested against mass and velocity delivered with surgical precision. Tungsten doesn't sing like a laser. It translates momentum into catastrophe. The Black Star moved like a hunter. Its quantum drive loosened them from the shadow of Earth and aimed them into the teeth of a fleet that had never imagined they'd be taught a new lesson in pain. Jake looked at his crew and saw faces lit by the blue glow of displays and by something fiercer, a recognition that survival can sometimes be an idea, and courage is just the refusal to let that idea go. If you're watching this story unfold and you've ever wondered what it feels like to stand in the last room where courage is made, tell me in the comments. If you like this slow burn, philosophical SF tone, hit subscribe and ring the bell. There's more that ruminates on what it means when a species remembers how to fight. We push now into the moment where an entire war is about to be reframed. The Black Star's bridge was a small theater and the galaxy an audience unaware it would be learning to cheer again. The Black Star did not pretend it was stealthier than it was. It moved like a silver argument cutting through darkness, its engines warming the vacuum in ribbons of blue. Across space, the Empire's formation waited in the geometry of confidence, layered lines of hull and shield, weapons prepared in an old choreography. Admiral Kathar and his officers believed their arrays were invulnerable because invulnerability had been habit. Habit was not a strategy, it was the same as complacency. Enemy fleet is moving into attack formation, Katie Ross reported, quiet but exact. They're not trying to evade. They think we are helpless. Then we show them how wrong they are, Jake said. The phrase was not bravado. It was a promise made in full knowledge of cost. All crew, prepare for battle. The physics of this fight were simple and stubborn. The Empire relied on energy shields tuned to stop coherent plasma and laser arrays. Those shields were exquisite at snuffing light. Kinetic projectiles, heavy, fast, and dumb in the old-fashioned sense, do not care for energy coherence. They carry momentum. A tungsten slug at a significant fraction of light is a question no shield can answer without changing itself. Target the lead ship, Jake ordered. Wait for my command. Ben put his hand on the rail by Jake's elbow, a gesture older than any fleet. Once we fire the first shot there's no going back, he said. Let them come, Jake replied. Amy began broadcasting their message to every human channel. The Black Star's voice moved through the void and into refugee stations and mining hulls, into places where humanity had learned to sleep with one eye open. The captain's words were simple, look, we have not lost everything, we have remembered an old, dangerous honesty called resistance. The first beam flashed across space from an alien cruiser, a deadly line meant to make gods out of annihilation. The Black Star danced. The quantum drive executed an impossible arc and the beam missed by a distance that tasted like fate. Now, Dan, Jake said. Rail guns sang. Tungsten slugs left their barrels with the kind of violence only practical physics can make beautiful. The projectiles moved so fast that alien sensors, trained to watch the wash of energy and the slow bloom of missiles, could not track the shards. The first slug punched through an enemy shields as if it were a curtain and slammed into engine core. The resulting cascade, a reactor breach, a containment collapse, set the cruiser alight and it became a bloom of orange in the black. Impossible, Admiral Kathar hissed as he watched one of his heaviest cruisers vanish in an explosion. Their tactical models did not include mass at relativistic velocities. They had not needed to. They had not expected humans to invent questions the armor could not answer. The Black Star turned aggression into an argument, momentum and surprise versus complacent power. Using the quantum drive, it moved oddly, sometimes appearing to vanish, sometimes reappearing where the Empire did not expect it. Each time it fired, another piece of the fleet went dark. Katie's voice lit up with a small, human joy. We've destroyed 8 vessels and damaged 6 more. They're scattering. Below decks Carl's voice was a constant, quantum drive holding, Captain, but we can't keep operating at this level indefinitely. Heat is building. Fuel cells are draining faster than predicted. Jake understood. Then take the Admiral out, he said simply. If we can break their command node, their cohesion will snap. Dan aimed and fired at the Dominion's fist. Slugs hammered through armor and ignited secondary explosions that made the flagship shudder. The Empire's confidence splintered. In 3 years of dominion, fear had been a privilege reserved for the conquered. Now it belonged, suddenly and hotly, to the conquerors. News, when human networks carry it, moves like a contagion. Resistance cells hid in asteroid tunnels and on forgotten moons. On New Deep, where miners had traded drills for duct-taped weapons, Captain Lisa Wong listened to Amy Carter's call and let herself hope for the first time in years. If Blackstar can pierce their shields, maybe our hacked rigs can, too, Sergeant Mike Torres said. A practical hope lodged in their bones. Marines stood straighter and bore weapons with hands that did not tremble. On a ragged station orbiting Kepler 22b, Commander Rick Stone heard the transmission and realized their fate could change if people chose to stop being afraid. We have 3 cargo haulers and 50 people who know how to use tools, Dr. Helen Brooks said. It's not much, but if we help, we might tilt things. Admiral Cather's failure drew the attention of the Empire High Command. Hololinks burned into the mind of Admiral Cathar as High Commander Zito, ancient, immense, and viciously precise, demanded answers. Zito's voice was like a mountain moving. You allowed one primitive vessel to destroy a dozen of our best. Explain, or die. Cathar melted into reports and excuses. The answer had the form of data, new weapons, unfamiliar impetus, a mistake in tactical assumptions. Zito, impatient with miscalculation, chose a remedy: send Admiral Vexer with the Third Fleet, 60 of the Empire's most advanced ships, a surgical blade of war, commanded by a Vorak woman whose tactics were famous for leaving nothing left to question. If anyone could unmake the Black Star, it would be Vexer. Back aboard the Black Star, Jake and Ben read incoming transmissions. Colonies that had been running now whispered plans of return. Cargo haulers volunteered for dangerous work. The symbol the Black Star had become, a small ship, a stubborn idea, was harder to kill than its hull. We're a symbol now, Ben said softly. That makes us a target. Jake did not flinch. Symbols are dangerous, he admitted. They are contagious. Carl pushed the quantum core further, like a pianist asking the instrument to sing notes it was not designed to hold. Dan recalibrated ammunition, tucking extra mass and timing into shells that would split and widen their lethal footprint. Lieutenant Amy worked encryption puzzles like a patient thief cracking a safe. Everything human aboard that ship was now narrow and purposeful. If you're engaged by this moment, the turning of fear into a tactic, pause and drop a comment. What would you salvage from a planet if it had to be carried in your hands? If this video has value for you, please subscribe. It helps stories like this find more quiet rooms where listeners can think. Stay, there's more ahead. The real test is not the first victory. It is the enemy's reply. The Third Fleet arrived like a storm, 60 warships materializing out of hyperspace, a living geometry of dread. At the center rode the dreadnought Eternal Dominion, a city in a hull. Admiral Vexer, silver-marked and unblinking, read sensor feeds and mapped their options. Vexer deployed a sensor net across the system. The intention was simple: find the human vessel, surround it, and remove it like a tumor. The Black Star hid among asteroids, cold and dark as stone. Inside the war room, Jake laid plans like bones: use their own communications against them, inject false orders, split formations, and then strike where their arrogance left thin skin. Dan had an innovation: cluster rounds that split into many smaller, fast fragments, a shotgun for a war that loved formation. Amy had their enemy's code in pieces like a puzzle she could fold into sabotage. Their approach would be surgical and risky. Emerging at maximum speed, Jake said, then we hack their network and light them up. If we fail loud. If we succeed, they will remember. There are moments in history that are small and private until they are not. This was one of them. The Black Star was about to move from being the last act of desperation into the first act of a revolution. The Black Star erupted from the asteroid field like a blade. Its quantum drive struck steady blue fire as the small ship accelerated into the heart of the Empire's formation. For a long-held second, Admiral Vexer simply could not reconcile what her screens were telling her: a single vessel, impossibly fast, racing to the center of a fleet assembled in careful cruelty. Then she ordered emergency weapons focus. The response was immediate, all guns locked, targeting Orcs trained on a point in space where a single human ship now stood. Inside the Black Star, Amy moved like a conductor. Her fingers coordinated swarms of code and signals, folding the Empire's command language into itself and spitting back a cascade of contradictions. False orders, seeded like weeds, grew into confusion. Enemy flagship, move to Sector 7, one command insisted. All cruisers adopt Omega defensive pattern, another insisted. Ships followed strange, impossible directives. Formations began to collide, shields overlapped and then failed because the choreography of protection had been interrupted. Direct hit on their comms, Amy said with a small, dangerous laugh. In the space between the comms and their captains, the Empire discovered doubt. Dan opened the rail guns and fired cluster rounds. Tungsten fragments, 20 per round, sheared through hulls and engines. The physics of momentum turned the Empire's disciplined formation into a sieve. Explosions roared across the fleet, bridges went dark, reactors vented. The Empire's numerical advantage collapsed under a technology it had not counted on and a tactic it had not imagined: surprise geometry and the creative misuse of enemy systems. Small green contacts bloomed on the Black Star's tactical display. Human ships. Miners from the belt. Refit cargo haulers. Refugee freighters. Ordinary people who had been hiding now leapt into the fight, repurposing tools into weapons and improvising tactics from the ruins. The Black Star's attack was an argument made obvious. The Empire's strength relied on coordination and unchallenged obedience. Disrupt that, and their superiority becomes fragile. Admiral Vexer's tactical officer tried to restore order. "We're hearing conflicting orders across the fleet," he said. "We can't determine which commands are legitimate." Vexer's reaction was the oldest in war: brute force. She focused the dreadnought Eternal Dominion, the fleet's heart, on the Black Star. Target the human vessel. Fire. Everything. And then the Black Star did the thing that would be replayed in every hidden bunker and scrubbed radio channel in the months to come. Chief Engineer Carl initiated a quantum drive overload, a controlled, violent bloom of spacetime distortion. The ship seemed to stutter, to leave a place and be sewn back in somewhere else. For the briefest of moments, reality on the bridge felt like a film strip advancing and cutting in a new sequence. The Black Star reappeared almost within touching range of the dreadnought's rear armor. At point-blank range the rail guns fired. Tungsten slugs punched through armor that had been called impenetrable, slugs that did not burn through shields but carved through metal by momentum and precision. The dreadnought's engine core breached and failed. The Eternal Dominion became a furnace and then a ruin. The explosion lit the starfield, radiation and debris painted long arcs across the system. The flagship, the pride of the Empire, became a story to tell and a warning to read. With their command node gone and communications saturated with false orders, the remaining fleet lost the narrative that had made them unstoppable. Captain after captain retreated. Lines that had once been the geometry of certainty dissolved into a scatter of wrecks and fleeing hulls. For the first time in a generation, the Galactic Empire felt fear. In the quiet after a storm, people noticed different things. Resistance groups on hidden moons stood taller. On New Deep, Marines who had been waiting for death put down their hands and picked up the possibility of planning. On the Kepler 22b station, cargo haulers that had been functional and frightened now talked openly about joining convoys meant to harass supply lines. Hope is an instrument. When tuned, it makes a surprising sound. Admiral Vexer watched the collapse of her careful plan and felt the sort of rage that is colder than anger. She had been entrusted with the task of restoring Empire order, and instead she had been humiliated. In military culture, humiliation is a contagious disease. Vexer would respond, and the scale of her response would be terrible. The Empire could not allow one human vessel to become a beacon. Back on the Black Star, Jake felt the weight of what they had done. "We took a fleet that believed it was inevitable and taught it contingency," he told Ben as they watched debris bloom on the tactical feed. But this is only a first chapter. They knew, too, that victory breeds enemies. The Empire would adapt, shields would be recalibrated, armor rethought, tactics revised. The Third Fleet had been scattered, but not annihilated. Vexer would rebuild. The Black Star, its engines, its crew, their courage, would be hunted harder than ever. And yet something irreversible had shifted. Where once existed surrender and the habit of fleeing, now there was a memory of resistance. Across human-controlled and hidden space, transmissions echoed, strikes succeeded, supply depots sabotaged, patrol routes ambushed. The Black Star had done what the resistance needed most. It had given the idea of possibility a shape. Jake walked the ship later that night, past sleeping stations and quiet consoles. He thought of Earth and the lives lost there, of the small hands that had once held his, of the communities that would now be forced to stand or to vanish. He felt the fragile, terrible obligation of leadership, that rarely romantic thing of being the one who carries others' hope as if it were both a weapon and a wound. If this sequence, the tactical gambit, the quantum jump, the burning flagship, stirred something in you, pause and leave a comment on what you think will come next. Do you want more slow, reflective battles that consider the ethics of survival? Or tighter, faster skirmishes? Subscribe if you want to follow this arc, leave a like if you felt the weight of the Black Star's choice. Because the war had shifted. It was no longer just a matter of human survival. It was, now, a question about what a species remembers about itself when cornered. The Black Star had not only destroyed ships, it had rewritten the grammar of hope. Admiral Vexer would come back. The Empire would not forget. But neither would the humans, and memory, once turned toward motion, is hard to stop. The Black Star sailed on, engines warm and rail guns emptying magazines into the widening silence. Out in the dark, breakout human fleets glinted like tentative constellations. This was the beginning of a different war, one fought not simply for territory but for the right of a species to write its own ending.